Hi, we're Joseph and Lee Renzi, and this is our book, Shepherds of the Lost, Family Secrets.
Here's the prologue and chapter 1. Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoy it.
Dedication. For our children who continuously remind us how wondrous life can be. Prologue. The in-between. The wind howled as Felix sat rigidly atop a massive hill, looking over the vast nothingness that lay before him. His white hair was matted from the cold rain, and icicles formed around the edges of his face. Eons of ice had accumulated around the seat Felix rested on, degrading the wooden chair into a spiky, menacing mess. Like a king atop his throne, Felix inspected his domain with a shrewd eye. The land was dreary and barren, a mass of grays and beiges. The air was cold, and the ground was covered in a blanket of ice with patches of dirty, sludgy snow. Barely any light filtered through the fog that hung heavy in the air. The clouds overhead seemed to cry out as an ever-constant drizzle churned in every direction. Strangely, no matter the day and no matter the weather, the moment the rain made contact with the ground, it nearly always froze. Behind Felix sprawled a massive, dark castle. It was cold and intimidating, with dozens of spires each reaching their peak far out of sight, up and beyond the ominous clouds. Two massive doors, etched with what appeared to be creatures crying out in agony, stood tall and mighty in the center of the building. For all its might and intimidation, decay and rot ran rife beneath the grand facade. Felix coughed a cold, wet cough, losing control for several seconds before clearing his throat. You'd think I'd be used to this terrible weather by now. He tapped his fingers in annoyance against the icy chair's arm. This place is miserably cold, even for me. He turned his head toward the castle. And these house guests have no manners, still raising such a ruckus, even after all these years. Will they never learn? A deep voice replied in his ear. It is time, my keeper. Time for us to finally return to your home. What are you talking about, Pride? An irritated Felix snarled. We go there all the time and take whatever we want. No, Felix. This is not what I mean. Pride's hollow, otherworldly voice responded. It is time for us to return to where we first met, to where your journey first began, to your hometown of Foggy Hollows. Return to Foggy Hollows, you say? Felix strummed his fingers deliberately one by one against the ice. As each finger hit the frozen chair, the arm of it cracked more and more beneath the force of his strength. You've waited long enough, Felix. We need to finish what we started and rid ourselves of the remaining shepherds. Pride paused to let his words sink in and then continued. Don't tell me you're still scared of your sister and what she did to you last time. Felix sprang to his feet and picked up the chair, ripping it from the ground where it had been frozen in place for an eternity. The cracking ice sounded as if it was shrieking in pain as he broke the throne free. Felix lifted the massive chair high into the air and slammed it onto the ground. It splintered into thousands of small pieces. Did I hit a nerve? Pride laughed mockingly. The air grew even more frigid as the rain turned into snow. Felix closed his eyes and began slowly waving his arms back and forth through the air. The vast layers of ice that covered the ground began to expand and crack, creating a hollow, echoing sound. The singing ice reverberated and boomed throughout the kingdom, becoming louder and louder with each note. The noises were so inexplicably strange and otherworldly, it was as if ancient beings were awakening from a slumber beneath the ice's surface. Like a conductor guiding the sweet symphony of his orchestra, Felix moved his hands and swayed back and forth in harmony with the hauntingly beautiful melody. When Felix finished his performance, he took a solemn bow. Foggy Hollows, he repeated slowly, recalling a life from long ago. Yes, I think you're right. It's time we return home. Your sister will be waiting for you, Pride said condescendingly, looking Felix over with challenging eyes. Esmeralda. Yes, I'm sure she will be. In fact, I'm counting on it. His eyes went entirely black as a smirk crept across one side of his mouth. Let the war begin. Chapter 1, The Snake Bite. Nobody invited you, Zach. Go away, Vidya said, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she shoved the boy from behind the rope swing. Vidya, he was just kidding. Why not let him stay? Aurelia interjected, watching from above as she sat on a tree branch. Vidya just shook her head in response. She didn't know Zach very well, but she knew she'd had enough of him. Her best friend Aurelia thought he was nice enough, but that was the only reason Vidya tolerated his company. This evening, he'd waltzed into Vidya's yard while she was relaxing on her rope swing and had the nerve to ask her if she thought she was too old for a swing. After she'd hopped off her swing in embarrassment, Zach immediately grabbed the swing and plopped himself right on it. "Trick question, you're never too old for a swing," he'd said with a laugh, enjoying himself at Vidya's expense. He always does stuff like this, Vidya thought, and continued pushing at him. "It's okay, Aurelia, Vidya just likes pushing me on the swing," Zach teased. "It's really nice of you, but I'm big enough to do it myself." Aurelia couldn't help but laugh at the scene. Zach was easily a full head taller than Vidya, and there was no way she would be able to push him off the swing. "I'm not giving you a push, I'm shoving you off," Vidya objected. "That's fine. I don't think there's really any difference," Zach replied as he swung back and forth. "I'm not kidding around. Get off now!" Vidya yelled, causing Aurelia to startle and nearly fall from the tree. As she stumbled and caught her balance, her large glasses fell off her face and onto the ground below. Surprised at Vidya's response, Zach jumped off the swing and went sailing into the air. He landed on his feet with a thump and turned around to give a quick wave. "I didn't know it was that serious. I was just messing around." "See you guys later," he said as he climbed onto his bike and rode off. "Sorry, and see you tomorrow," Aurelia yelled after him. "Good riddance," Vidya snapped, making sure she was loud enough for Zach to hear. She turned to her friend and crossed her arms. "Why do you keep inviting him over?" Vidya asked angrily. "I saw him outside on my way over, and he asked to join us. He's always been nice to us. I don't understand why you get so upset with him," Aurelia said, puzzled. She climbed down from the tree, picked up her glasses, and shrugged as she put them back on. "Anyway, what do you want to do now?" "Nothing. I'm sure my mom will call me in for dinner any minute," Vidya said irritably. "Oh, okay. Well, I guess I'll head home too," Aurelia said. She knew that when Vidya got in one of her moods, she'd better let her friend cool off. "See you tomorrow then?" Vidya questioned as Aurelia climbed on her bike. "Tomorrow is good. Toodles," Aurelia said cheerfully as she rode away. Vidya sat down on the swing, relieved to finally be alone. She wasn't very social, even though she wished she could be. She noticed the seat was still warm from Zach sitting there moments earlier. "Gross," she muttered, annoyed as she began swaying back and forth. The rope swing hung from an enormous live oak tree. Dad installed it the summer before last, hoping it would entice Vidya to spend more time outside. His plan worked, as the wooden swing he'd built with Vidya was now her favorite place to spend her time and held a special place in her heart. The tree's massive branches shot out from the trunk in all directions, twisting and turning. Some of the branches dipped all the way to the ground before climbing back up into the sky. Vidya's front yard was quite large, but the grand old tree stood out as the centerpiece, towering high above the house. Its extensive canopy of branches offered shade that covered a substantial part of the ground. The massive trunk splintered into multiple limbs near the base, which made climbing it quite easy. It was late October, and Spanish moss dripped from the large limbs, creating a sorrowful, haunting look in the cool evening air. Vidya held the ropes of the swing loosely in her hands as she swung back and forth, her feet scuffing the ground below as she floated in the dying daylight. Now that Aurelia and Zach were gone, Vidya quickly became lost in thought, thinking about her growing family. Vidya wasn't sure if she wanted to be a big sister. She'd enjoyed the perks of being an only child for the past 11 years. Sure, there were times when she had thought it would be fun to have a little brother or sister to play with. But now that the family's newest addition was set to arrive any day, Vidya thought she'd be happier waiting another 11 years. Or better yet, no sibling at all, thanks. Why didn't Mom and Dad ask me if I wanted a sibling before they went and had another? Why wasn't I included in this decision, she wondered, drifting back and forth on the swing in the shade of the tree. Halloween was only 1 week away, and she worried this baby was going to make his or her grand entrance just in time to keep Vidya's pillowcase void of candy and her creepy witch costume hanging in the closet. Mom was already 2 days past due. There's nothing fashionable about being late, Vidya thought to herself. What a rude and selfish little potato. She laughed at the visual she had created in her mind, but the more she stewed in her troubled thoughts, the angrier she became with her parents. Had she told them about her concerns? Had she made them aware of her reservations? No, of course not. When they told her they had a surprise, she was excited. She thought it was the trip to Disney World they'd been talking about for years. Then when they told her the good news, all she felt was a sense of dread. She wanted to let all her fears come tumbling out, but she couldn't bear to wipe the joyful looks off her parents' faces. Plus, if she shared her feelings, she figured it would have caused another silly teaching moment, as her mom liked to say. And Dad, he'd ramble on about how important family is and how this would be an opportunity for her to learn to share. No, I'm not interested in hearing any of that, she thought. So instead, Vidya had blankly stared back at her mother when the news was shared and said the first thing that popped into her head, "Isn't that just yummy?" That was kind of weird. Why did I say that, she thought, but then imagined the chubby cheeks of a newborn and giggled to herself, throwing her head back in the breeze. Although Vidya did not know it, the news of a baby had been a surprise to her parents, Frank and Charlotte as well. Her father's eyes filled with tears of joy when Charlotte had shared the news with him. Frank always wanted more children, so he was elated and could not wait for the baby's arrival. Charlotte had cried too, but her tears were that of fear and not joy. She felt she could hardly shield Vidya from the dangers of the world and was certain she couldn't ever bear double the worry, double the responsibility of protecting another child. She decided many years ago, somewhat disappointedly, that it was best for her not to have any more children. Charlotte once dreamed of having a big family, but that changed when she lost her lifelong best friend, Annabelle, and Annabelle's husband, Victor, to a monstrous darkness that festers in the shadows of our world. She had nearly lost Vidya too, who was only 3 years old at the time. Charlotte's fears were partially subdued when she saw the excitement in Frank's face at the news. She knew, despite her reservations, this baby had the most devoted father she could have ever imagined. As the months of her pregnancy wore on, Charlotte slowly began to warm to the idea of having another child. Now that the baby could come any day, her excitement was palpable. She would protect this baby, just as she protected Vidya, and everything would be fine. Vidya, on the other hand, still couldn't shake the feeling that somehow this baby was going to replace her, even though she knew it was probably a silly thought. Vidya did not like surprises, and the news of this baby was a huge surprise. Worst of all, her parents decided to keep the surprises coming. They weren't even going to find out if it was a boy or a girl until the slimy little bundle of joy made its glorious arrival. Vidya's cheeks deepened to a shade of crimson as she continued to stew. "Let's be honest, does anybody actually want a sibling?" she mumbled to herself. But she knew the answer was yes, and she wondered why she felt so differently. Her mind continued to wander through the possibilities. A boy. That could be fine, she tried to convince herself. Sure, he'd likely be dirty, grimy, smelly, and cry all the time, but he'd be cute, wouldn't he? A girl, though, Vidya pondered. That would definitely be worse. There is nothing joyful about having to share all my stuff with a snot-nosed, slimy slug. She shook her head, wondering why she had such negative feelings towards this baby, but she continued to spiral. A baby girl could replace me, and at the very least, take all my parents' attention away from me, she concluded. I won't stand for that. No, not at all. I could maybe learn to live with a grimy, smelly little brother. But if Mom and Dad bring home a girl, I don't know what I'll do. Unbeknownst to Vidya, a massive vulture sat perched in wait atop the highest branch of the live oak tree. Its red, otherworldly eyes glared directly down at Vidya. The creature's beak remained oddly agape as it watched her intently. The more Vidya stewed, the bigger the bird's eyes grew, and the wider it opened its mouth. It almost looked as if it enjoyed the turmoil festering within Vidya. Feelings of envy pulsed through Vidya as she thought about a faceless little baby taking attention away from her. She clenched her hands tightly around the thick rope of the swing, unable to think about anything else. Despite her troubled thoughts, Vidya looked like a typical 11-year-old girl. She was of average height with a slender build. She wore her long, shiny, dark brown hair in a ponytail to keep it tamed and away from her face. Her thin lips were usually pursed tightly together, giving her a very severe expression, and her eyebrows were perpetually furrowed as if deep in an uncomfortable thought. Her bright green eyes slanted upwards at the corners, giving her a striking appearance that had a way of captivating her audience. She stared at her house, wondering if there would be enough room for everyone and everything once the baby came. The spare bedroom she had taken over had already been redone and replaced with a nursery. Her belongings that used to sit in that room had been moved to the dark, gloomy basement. Dad assured her that their house had more than enough space for a family of 4. He went so far as to say it could even fit a couple more children if ever needed. Dad's words, while well-intended, lately had the opposite effect on Vidya. This instance was one of the worst yet. One sibling sounds hard enough. More than one sibling, that would be some kind of wicked torture, Vidya thought. Vidya had been so lost in thought, she didn't notice the comfortable, cool daytime air had been replaced with the chill of twilight. The chill was nothing new to Vidya. The town of Foggy Hollows was known for being colder than all the surrounding towns, something no one seemed to be able to explain. This evening, though, had a particularly chilly bite. The setting sun cast a reddish glow about her house and yard, and a breeze picked up the heady scent of autumn. Vidya breathed in deeply. What was it she was smelling? That's the smell of rot, she thought, craning her head to the side, eyeing the pile of leaves her dad had raked earlier. She took another deep breath, enjoying the scent of the decay. As she dragged her feet on the ground, she noticed something moving in the grass below her. She brought the swing to a stop and leaned forward, trying to get a better look at what was slinking toward her. Is it a broken tree limb? Why would a branch look like it was moving? My eyes must be playing tricks on me in the setting sun, she thought. All at once, the object she thought to be a stick twisted and sprang up at her, and Vidya felt a sharp pain course through her ankle, leg, and then entire body. Realizing it was an enormous snake, she screamed and jumped off the swing, her eyes squarely fixed on the large serpent. The snake was a muddy brown and looked like it was smiling as its tongue flickered in and out of its contorted mouth. When the serpent sprang again, this time Vidya was ready. She swiftly moved to the left, dodging the snake's attack, and ran inside yelling for her mom and dad. "What happened?" her mom asked, looking down at the 2 puncture wounds on her daughter's ankle in the brightly lit living room. "A snake bit me," Vidya answered through tears. "It was watching me and pounced like a lion. It was so creepy. It went in to bite again, but I got away just in time." "Where were you when it bit you?" Dad asked, entering the room with a look of worry. "On the swing," said Vidya. "I'm going to try and find it," Dad said, rushing out of the room. "Does it hurt?" Mom asked, grabbing the first aid kit off the shelf and instructing Vidya to sit on the couch. Once they were both seated, Mom began dabbing it gently with a wet, soapy cotton round. Despite Mom's cool and calm exterior, Vidya noticed a tremor in her mother's hands. "It burns," Vidya replied, looking up at her mother. The resemblance between Vidya and Charlotte was unmistakable. They both had the exact same tilted, striking green eyes, high cheekbones, and smooth, dark brown hair that glistened with hints of red in the sunlight. Nearly every physical attribute Vidya bore either came from her mother or her mother's side of the family, the Hartmans. Charlotte had a true kindness about her face, but almost wore a weary look, as if she had lived much longer than her 35 years of age. Sometimes Vidya noticed a melancholy expression in her mother's eyes as her father spoke of their past years as a young married couple, and she wondered what her mother was thinking about. As a child, Charlotte had struggled with the same shortcomings that Vidya now dealt with, although anyone who knew Charlotte now would find it impossible to believe she was once reckless, quick-tempered, and very envious. Charlotte's whole world changed after her best friend's untimely death. Riddled with guilt and shame, Charlotte fell into a state of despair. Eventually, she climbed her way out of this dark hole, but after the loss of her friend, she became an extremely reserved, private woman. Still, the one thing she was not able to mask was her constant worry that something terrible could happen at any moment. Vidia's father, on the other hand, was an easygoing man and had always been so. He had dirty blonde hair, hazel eyes, and a strong, square jawline. He was traditionally handsome in every sense of the word. Dad's was a calm, cool personality, slow to anger, and always seemed to be in a good mood as far as Vidia could tell. The old saying of opposites attract was very much true in this instance. Her parents' bond was so strong that Vidia had never seen them so much as argue. They brought out the best in each other and believed, more than anything, that family came first. Frank saw so much of Charlotte in Vidia, and he was immensely proud of his smart, beautiful, and determined daughter. Vidia had a deep love of tradition and a stalwart loyalty to the small circle of people she trusted. Frank could sense a great deal of anxiety in his daughter hiding beneath her angry outbursts. These outbursts had grown significantly since they had shared the news with Vidia of her mother's pregnancy. This worried both Frank and Charlotte, but Frank was confident that Vidia would warm to her little brother or sister once he or she arrived. "Why is Dad trying to find the snake? He might end up getting bit too," Vidia asked. "He needs to find it to make sure it's not venomous. If he can't find it, or if he does and it is venomous, we'll need to take you to the hospital." Something flashed in Charlotte's eyes and her anxiety grew. "It's okay, it will all be okay," she said, taking a deep breath as she attempted to calm herself. Slowly, the tremor in her hand ceased. "What color was the snake? Did it have any odd markings on its head?" she questioned urgently. "It was brown," Vidia responded. "Did it have a red spot on its forehead?" Mom asked again with worry in her voice. "I don't know, I didn't see one," Vidia said, confused. "There's a brown snake crawling on the driveway," Dad said, re-entering the room. "Looks like a typical garden snake to me, except that it's big, real big, probably more than 6 feet long. Never seen." Mom interrupted, looking at Dad with panic in her eyes. "Frank, does it have a red marking on its forehead?" "I didn't notice one. What type of snake would that be?" Dad replied with a puzzled look. "We need to be sure. Go check again," Mom demanded. A bit confused, but seeing the worry in Mom's eyes, Dad responded, "Okay, sure, I'll double check." Dad went back outside and returned a couple minutes later. "The snake's not in the driveway anymore. I looked all over the yard and can't find it anywhere. He's gone, but don't worry, Charlotte. It was a harmless brown garden snake. Nothing new. We get them all the time. A big one for sure, and the rodents better watch out, but we're fine. Promise," Dad said with confidence. "You didn't sound so sure earlier," Mom said as she twisted her hands nervously. "I'm sure it's fine, and we'll keep an eye on the snake bite," Dad said, trying to calm Charlotte. Mom sighed as she rubbed Vidia's back. "So there was no red marking on its forehead?" she asked once more. "I would have noticed that. Everything will be fine. We just need to keep the wound clean," Dad responded in a soothing voice. Vidia felt a touch of disappointment at the news, as she so craved the spotlight, and a venomous bite would have made her the center of attention for days, much more so than a non-venomous bite. Seeing the sad look on his daughter's face, Frank continued, "What do you say after dinner we pick a new book to start reading together? It's been a few weeks since we finished reading the last one." "That's a great idea," Vidia agreed, forgetting about the snake bite. After dinner, they all made their way to the living room. Vidia walked over to the old built-in shelves that lined the far end of the living room with a particular book in mind. Her parents had an enormous collection of books, many antique and handed down to them from relatives. Vidia spent many bored hours over the years eyeing the collection and skimming novels. It didn't take any time for her to spot what she was looking for. "I've wanted to read this one for a while now," she said, pulling a worn leather copy of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein off the shelf. "Ah, yes. Very good choice, and what better time with Halloween just around the corner to read Frankenstein," Dad said, raising his arms and taking long, lurching steps toward Vidya. Mom and Vidya laughed in unison at Dad's imitation of Frankenstein's monster. I haven't read that one since I was about your age, Vidya. Let's do it, Mom agreed. Vidya raced back to the couch and plunked herself down on it and crossed her legs. Dad, you read the first chapter and Mom can read the second. Then I'll read the third, fourth, and maybe fifth, depending on how long we want to read for. Dad and Mom both laughed. Dad turned off all the bright lights nearby, leaving only a small lamp on to create an appropriate ambiance for a scary story. He sat down and snuggled up to Mom as Vidya handed him the book. Frank cleared his throat, opened it to page 1, and began reading. Dad's voice always became dignified and theatrical when he began reading out loud. Everyone always remarked that he could have been a sportscaster or radio personality with his booming, polished tone. Vidya took a throw blanket off the arm of the couch, wrapped it around herself, and leaned back, propping her legs up over her mom's lap. The slow, sweet pitter-patter of a light rain began, enveloping Vidya as if in a hug and warming her to the core. Finally calm, the thought of the baby popped back into her head. Vidya imagined that the following week they'd again be cuddled up on the couch together reading. But rather than a family of 3, they'd be a family of 4. She smiled at the thought of a baby sitting on her lap, and for a moment she felt at peace. As she relaxed, an unexpected sharp pulse of pain coursed through her ankle where she had been bitten. With this, the momentary peace she felt vanished, and a loathing crept into the corners of her mind. Vidya tried to push away the bad feelings, but she couldn't, and worried these evenings might very well be coming to an end once the new baby came.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed the beginning of our book, Shepherds of the Lost, Family Secrets.
If you decide to read the full book, we'd love to hear what you think.
Until next time, this is Joseph,
And this is Lee Renzi.
signing off.